say hi.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, so what year were you born in?
I was born in 1957,
Interesting. All right.
which makes me almost 65.
Okay. Nice. All right. All right. What did you think about segregation, like when you were younger?
Well, in the late 60s and early 70s is the years that I was in junior high and high school. And so I went into junior high in the same school with my high school. At that time, it was 7th through 12th. And later years, two of my younger brothers did not get to go to that same high school before they went to a junior high school somewhere else. So they were forced into a school that was all black. And I was in a school that was about half and half. And honestly, color never was a problem for us because of the way we were raised. It seemed like color never came up till somebody made it about color. It never was about color because color was present. It was only about color with those that made it about color.
I see. All right.
So my whole experience, in the 60s and 70s with segregation, I grew up in a really unique situation. I ended up going to an elementary school that was all white, okay? I had my next door neighbor was my best friend. And for all those 6 years, we were the teacher's pets, best friends, and the top two kids really in the school. And so we were everybody's choice to succeed. And so when the time came for us to go to high school, and in those days it was junior high and high school combined, I had a unique thing happen. When I chose my school, I chose the school I was going to go to. I had an option of two. I chose the school I was going to go to based on my parents had gone there. And I knew about that school. I wanted to follow my parents' footsteps. And little did I know, but my next door neighbors vocalized that their son would never go to that school. And there was prejudice things came out of that statement. And that just really flipped me. It didn't compute. Because let me explain my culture to you. On one side of the school, the street was named Maryland Avenue. On the other side, it was Vermont Avenue. On the Maryland side, it was housing. It was just neighborhood housing. My grandmother, my daddy's house as a kid, my grandmother's house was on the Maryland side of the school, right above the school, exactly above the school. Later became part of the new football field that they built for the school. They literally took her house and bought it and made it. On the other side was the projects, low-income housing. I had another relative living in the projects on the Vermont side. So our culture was first of all the regular neighborhood. It was also the project neighborhood. And then it was also, we've been raised to believe red, yellow, black, and white, they're all precious in the sight. So we were, so to speak, colorblind. And we had great friends that were black and white, and bad enemies that were black and white. So really it was never a color thing unless somebody made it a color thing. Mm-hmm. So I grew up mowing my grandmother's yard, which was on the one side of the school, and on the other side, I grew up walking up that street looking for what might be coming at me. And it had nothing to do with black or white, it was low-income housing. And so we grew up and still know to this day great friends that are black or white in that culture. And we had enemies that were black or white. So people made it about color, but it wasn't about color. And so all my days, I never knew that I should be prejudiced against someone because of the color of their skin. Somebody had to teach that. And because it was so embedded in me, the biblical approach and the way I was raised, it never was allowed to take root in me like it did a lot of people. So to me, red lives matter, yellow lives matter, black lives matter, and white lives matter. And I have no problem with placing the emphasis on someone that was mistreated and trying to bring them up, because in my growth, in my coming up, and it clearly wouldn't be politically correct today, but my black friends and me literally called each other names that you could not call today.
Like you couldn't call anyone that
No, we laughed at them, but we did it. I mean, cracker, and the N word and stuff like that, and laughed at each other. We did it, but we loved one another.
Yeah.
Those names were just they didn't mean anything, but today they do. They mean a lot.
Yeah, I see.
So, but anyway, to this very day, I wish we had more of a mix in our church, in our lives. I wish there was more of a mix.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my story.
Thank you. Thank you. So do you remember any, do you remember any information about JFK or JFK getting shot? Because I know you were around that time.
The one thing that sticks out to me the most is I was 6 years old. It was about, what was it, 1963?
Yeah.
I was about 6 years old, and I recall coming home from school one day, and his funeral was on the TV. I'll never forget it as long as I live. I walked in the front door of my mother's house, at my house at the time, and I glanced to the left, and the funeral proceedings were on their black and white TV over on the left wall, and they were singing that song, "What the World Needs Now Is Love, Sweet Love," and the casket was rolling down the road, and that impacted me so greatly, I've never forgot. It's been branded inside me.
I see. Thank you. So I know you weren't in the war, but I know you were around during the time, I believe. How was what did you think about the Vietnam War?
Well, you know, at that time, my mama had 6 boys, and none of us really fell in that gap, the wartime. So there was no war, actually, no draft while we were in that window. There was none. So none of us ever went, and my father was not a part of that war. He was in the Navy, and he was a part of it. He was coming up during an era of another time. But later, my stepdad was a Vietnam veteran. So most of my thoughts about Vietnam were kind of afterthoughts.
I see. So our last question, well, actually one of our last questions is, what were your thoughts when you were younger? Like, did you like the environment? Or was it nicer in the 60s, 70s, stuff like that? Or do you like it now better?
It was such a different time. Nobody was on edge about anything. People could almost leave their doors unlocked,
Really?
in a lot of ways. And we were allowed to play all through the neighborhood and feel safe. You know, we had friends throughout the neighborhood, and you could roam and go to the ballpark, and go to the store, and never had to think about it. It's totally different then, and I loved it, than it is today.
Must be nice, yeah. Must have you had a lot of freedoms, yeah.
A lot of freedoms.
So our last question for you today is, how did you meet your wife?
My wife is Kathy, and she was Kathy Riley, and the way I met her was during our middle school days. She was going to one school and I was going to another, and I literally was walking down the street when I saw her, and I saw that smile, those brown eyes, and that brown hair, and didn't realize it at the time because I was so young, but I became hooked. And I was only about 13, 14 years old, and so we married just 2 or 3 years later, believe it or not, while we were still teenagers, and we're still married today.
Woo, yeah. How long have you guys been married?
We're in our 48th year of marriage, and we are in our 51st year of relationship.
Commitment, right there. Wow.
Yeah, she's committed. That's why we've done so well.
What's the secret?
I give her most of the credit, but I think the thing that's missing today in marriage relationships is the commitment going in.
Yeah.
People really did say till death do us part. And with us, of course, a threefold cord's not quickly broken is our approach biblically. And we just have always had the Lord in our relationship, and that's always made a difference.
Amen. Yeah. All right, well, thank you.
Yes, sir. I got a story I'm going to tell you. It's the story of a shoplifter that went flying through the air and just hit me really good, gave me a serious concussion. And his name was Sam Ed Ram, okay? And what happened this particular night I'm talking about is we had caught a shoplifter, and we always would obtain him. It was in a Kroger store where I was employed. And we would obtain the shoplifter and bring him into the deli area and then fill out a shoplifting report. And while we're filling out the report, the police are on the way to take him to jail, and we just did not tell that information because that would get them violent. And this particular night, we had a paddy wagon crew that was not the normal crew, and so they weren't versed in what the protocol was. They would usually come right in and search them and cuff them, and then you didn't have to worry about them attacking you anymore. But this particular night, these two police officers came in, and they were just bystanders until we were done. And once the guy, the shoplifter, realized he was going to jail, he became angry. And he come running across the front, and he flew through the air, and he hit me right here. And my glasses, he didn't hit my glasses, but my glasses went flying off, and they wadded up like a pretzel. And it knocked me out. I had a concussion, it knocked me out. But I came to real quick, and I saw what was happening to this young man. He went the scenic route and shed some blood before he could ever even leave the location, okay? But the moral of the story really is the next day or two, my brother contacted me and he said, do you know a guy named Sam Ed Ram? I said, yeah, I do. I said, how do you know him? He said, well, I was in jail with him last night. And he said, we just got to talking. And he asked me, he said, what are you in for? I said, what are you in for? And long story short, Sam Ed Ram said, well, I was caught for shoplifting down here at the Kroger store on Broadway. He said, really? He said, I got a brother that works at the Kroger store on Broadway. He said, which Kroger store was it? He said, Broadway Shopping Center. Yeah, my brother works there. He said, what's your brother's name? He said, Dale Berry. And he said, Sam Ed Ram crawled up in a ball, in a fetus position, and laid there shaking the rest of the night. And he said, what it appeared to Sam Ed Ram, it seemed like he thought that they had strategically put him in jail with my brother as a setup to take care of the problem. But that wasn't the case at all. It was just mere coincidence.
Just random
Just really,
random,
yeah, it's just coincidence.